As I crossed the finish line at the Tulsa Marathon, I felt surprisingly strong and incredibly joyful. If you'd have told me that I'd stop during the marathon to take selfies, eat donuts, and even do Jello shots, I'd have said, "You're nuts." None of those activities are consistent with optimal athletic performance, and none of those are things I ever thought I'd try. However, I really enjoyed this race because I set aside optimal athletic performance in exchange for something better: quality time with my daughter as she ran her first half marathon. We raced together, we laughed together, and we enjoyed life together. I'm VanEpps, and welcome to today's episode of Stories from the Saddle. The most fascinating experiences of my life were those in which I saw people being joyful who, by most earthly standards, would seem to have no reason to be joyful. On each of my 3 mission trips to Haiti, I struggled to wrap my head around how these people could be so incredibly joyful. These beautiful people live in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. They have limited food, limited clean water, limited sanitation, and yet somehow they're incredibly joyful despite the lack of material wealth. Happiness and joy are not at all synonymous. Happiness comes and goes based on external factors. Joy, however, is an emotion that's deeply rooted in who you are and what you believe. No matter what may be happening right now, joyful people are able to see beyond that. They're able to see the hope for the future. The defining moment of this race came just a few miles in. A spectator had bought a box of donuts, was standing in the middle of the course, and offering donuts to the runners. It never crossed my mind to stop and have a donut. Lexi never crossed her mind not to. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "Come on, Dad, let's have a donut." Just a few miles later, some spectators were offering pudding shots. Again, my initial thought was, no way. Lexi looked at me and said, "Why not?" For the first time in my racing history, I wasn't racing against my watch. I wasn't racing against a clock. I wasn't racing against anybody else. I was just out there having fun, enjoying the experience. Throughout the race, these stops became normal. We stopped for donuts, slices of pizza. We stopped to take a lot of selfies along the way, and we just focused on having a good time and enjoying being with each other and enjoyed the experience of racing. As we approached the last 3 miles, Lexi was in obvious pain, and I was wondering if she'd make it through. Yet, it never fazed her. She laughed, she smiled, she said, "Let's just go on and have a good time, we'll get through this." It's so easy to get caught up in our circumstances. We strive for happiness, but when our circumstances change, then we find ourselves unhappy. Rather, I like the approach Lexi took. Make your own fun, create your own happiness, but do it out of being rooted in a joyful attitude. It's a choice you make each and every day. On that particular day, I reset my priorities, and from then on, I've chosen joy. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Stories from the Saddle. If so, please click on the like button, and don't forget to click subscribe if you'd like to hear more Stories from the Saddle. As always, remember, life's not just about the destination, so take some time along the way and enjoy the journey.